Let's have a look at our colours. We've got our bright blue, cobalt blue sky here. We've got the duller green for the hill in the distance, bright green for the grass here with all the light on it, and then back to a duller and cooler area here. And then the Jacaranda, which is a purple. In the shadow area, it looks a little bit more bluish, while in the sunlit area, it leans a bit more to the pink. So we'll create two different colours and varying tones for this. Well, mainly two different colours. We've only got just so much space in our palette. And the bright green. Let's mix some colours. So cobalt blue sky, dull green in the distance, which we don't have to mix now. What we do need to mix is the bright green. Here we go. And a little shadow colour there. So cobalt blue for the sky. Good, that'll do. And then the bright green. Start with aureolin. Anytime I'm going to mix a bright green, I start with my coolest yellow, which is the aureolin. And then a little bit of cobalt turquoise. I should have put more paint in here before we started. I'm going to add a little bit of cobalt blue. That's better. And the reason I added that is because while it's quite a bright green, it's got that, to my eyes, that slightly cooler look to it. And here we've got the distant hills. So for that, I'm just going to mix a dull green. And really, I should have started with the raw umber or French ultramarine, because that's my go-to dull green mix. But a little bit of aureolin doesn't hurt either. And that's pretty good too. Let's mix some shadow colour, just some French ultramarine, a little bit of permanent rose. And just a hint of burnt sienna. Make sure it leans slightly to the blue. To the pink. There we go. There's our colours. The light is coming from this direction, and hence the sky up above is a little bit lighter here, a little bit darker there. So the sky will go from lighter to darker, and then from top down it'll be darker and lighter this way. So I'll just give it a slight angle. That. I'm now going to dip my brush in water, clean water. Now I've already come down into the tree. Water. The important thing is this crescent of lit jacaranda. Let's run this down here. Do this fast enough that we can reclaim the paper with the tissue. Cobalt blue is not a staining colour, so it's easy to lift that. So I started with my strongest sky colour, only to about there, and then since then all I've been doing is picking up more and more water, okay, to give us that nice graded look. And my sky is lighter than what's in the photo, but it'll allow me to get the brightness of the jacaranda colour. So I'll pick up my sea sponge, and I'm going to get one that's got lots of little furry bits on it. Pick up some of this. I'm going to dilute it a bit, however. Now I'm just lifting out this leading edge. And breaking up any sharp edges. That'll do. Now we'll go into our brighter green. I'm going to paint into the blue. Clean this out. And then I'll pick up some of this darker green. Just clean that out. When you clean your sea sponge, you've got to squeeze all the water out. By the way, if you happen to be allergic to any of these paints, then by all means, wear gloves when you do this. Paint around our cow. Paint around the tree trunk. Let's just change that. Okay, then I'm going to grab my fan brush, take out most of the paint, and then just drag some of this green. Some grass here. Now, this hill here, part of it is in sunlight. So what I've done is I've picked up some of this bright green, mixed it with some of this duller green, and I'm going to go in and just put a few little dabs, glimpses of brighter green in the distance. A lot of these will be covered over, but hopefully some won't. Just hinting at that distant hill. Leave gaps. And then in the foreground, I'm going to make this darker tone green. Add a bit more cobalt blue to it. Let that sit there for a bit. Actually, it won't matter, because later when we put the shadow in, we'll use the shadow color to create the grass effect. So let's just run that through there. I'll get my size 8 brush, because there's little textured sections. Like if we look at the ground, it's not just mode ground. You've got little shadow areas other than the big shadow, but you've got, little clumps here and there, and we want to create a bit more interest in the foreground. Now, get rid of that. Bit of green, bit of French ultramarine, burnt sienna. Again, I'm just hunting for colours that I think will work. Vary the colour a bit more brown. Little highlights here, I'm going to paint around them a bit. Okay, that'll do. This is dried enough now that I can paint the distant hill and have it stop where I want it to stop. Now I've got this mixture that I put together before. I'm going to dip the brush in some clean water, and that's put in this distant hill. Bring it up close. Something like that. And then I'll just get my fan brush and we'll break up that edge. Just hinting at the trees. You want to give the impression that there's foliage and things like that. I'm going to dilute this mixture with a bit of the blue and add a bit of that over here. Just to emphasize this distant hill a bit better. Again, get rid of any sharp edges. In a little while, we'll come in and put in the proper shadow shape. Get rid of anything that looks unnatural, like triangles and things like that. And then here we've got these trees that are closer to us, so they're going to be stronger The dark areas will be stronger in tone, but because they're in bright light, the light areas are going to be lighter than that. So I'm going to pick up some of this green, mix it with this green here. You have to keep thinking, okay, what's it going to look like when I do the tree? There we go. The main thing is to have, some tones, the darker tones here, a little bit darker than over there. And while that's drying, let's put in the foliage that runs along here. So we'll darken this, a little bit of French ultramarine and raw umber. And now effectively we're painting the negative space between the blades of grass with this darker shadow, a darker foliage colour. Don't want a lot of paint in your brush when you're using the side of the brush to create this texture. And you can see this darker tone, see the depth I was able to create with that. And again, some of these dark tones need to be strengthened, so I'll add more French ultramarine and burnt sienna. Sorry, French ultramarine and raw umber. I'm going to lift some of this and I've got this bright green I've mixed with the aureolin and cobalt turquoise. And hopefully when I come to paint the shadow, that will read like, you know, little highlights on the tops of some of these trees. Just scrape some of those in. All right, I need to dry this and then I can put in the distant shadows. Be right back. So now I want to put in the shadows along here and up here. Got my shadow color. Again, I have to keep thinking of tones. I don't want to make these tones stronger in tone than these ones, but I think what I've got here is fine. Let's just test it. That would be good. Okay. There seems to be some streaks running through here, so I'll just put the streaks in first. So there's some streaks I've just put in. Then I can come in and paint the trees. You know, I'm going to get my size 8 brush. This is just a bit, these shapes are just a bit too small for the size 12. Don't want a lot of paint in there. Just hint at some little valleys and that. It's important to make sure your shadows here don't look too regular in terms of spacing. And that's a nice little shape, so we'll keep that. And then over here, go back to my small brush. Actually, I'll paint some trunks first. Good. You always come back and add a bit more shadow later. And I'm going to pick up some of this dark green. Its main virtue is it's quite thick. And I'm going to use it to put in these little mini valleys. Just hint at that. While that's drying, we'll put the shadow across here. Now, again, the shadow shape's not totally flat because the ground has undulations and that in it. So what I generally do is I pick up some clean water and a reasonably drippy brush, meaning when I do this, when I tip it like this, the water drips out. And then here and there, just make the odd little dab. There we go. And then we'll go into the shadow colour. I'm going to add a bit more blue. Okay. We're going to mix some more of this shadow colour. I want a bit more variation. Permanent rose, lots of French ultramarine, just a little bit of burnt sienna. Too strong. Then I'll get my fan brush Pick up some paint. Break up some of these sharp edges because you're not going to get a straight line when there's lots of grass around. Very quick. And then here I'll break up some of these sharp edges. Change the angle. And you'll see what I've done here is I've left the cow untouched because I want part of the cow to have a bit of a highlight on it. And the same with this tree. Well, the tree already has a bit of a highlight up there. My highlight will come down a bit more. We now work on the hero of our painting, which is the jacaranda itself. So we're going to mix 3 colours, 2 different tones for the and slightly varying colours for the jacaranda, and then a colour for the tree trunks. So let's make some space. And I'll preserve this green for if I need to sort of add a little bit more of that bright green in the gaps around the jacaranda. And because we're using sea sponges, I need to mix a lot of paint. It's amazing how much the sea sponge will absorb. So I'm going to mix what was left over from this shadow colour into my darker jacaranda mix, and here this will be the lighter mix. I'm shooting to overmix rather than undermix for this. And you really have to test your tones because we're mixing so much paint, it looks so much stronger than what it is. If I test that, you can see how much lighter it is. A little bit more permanent rose. Make sure this is well mixed. Add a bit of cobalt blue to it just to cool it down. This is the cobalt blue is probably more a matter of taste. I don't think it's critical. Good. That'll do for our light tone. And then in here, this will be our darker tone. Just add lots, start by adding lots more of the paint than I put there. But this has got to lean more to the blue than this one over here. Great. Okay. That will do for those two. For the trunks and that, I'm just going to start with some burnt sienna, a little bit of cobalt blue, good. And I know there's some lit areas, we'll adjust that at the time. I don't need to worry too much about this. I'll mix a little bit more. Because most of my attention will be in creating the pattern of the foliage. By the time I get into putting the trunks, this may dry and end up with a stronger tone. That's why I've added more water and made it a slightly lighter mixture. I'm going to pick up my sea sponge. This is the one that's got the most little furry bits on it. And I'm going to start with the lightest tone. Now, see how much paint I've got there? Watch this. The sea sponge just soaks it up. I could soak even more up, but I think this is probably enough. Concentrate on creating an interesting pattern here and moving the brush around, or the sponge around. Well, it's a brush, isn't it? Just made from sea sponge. Try to paint around some of these bits of green that we've left. Where you overlap, you'll get a darker mark, and that's okay too. Leave some space for branches. I'm using my lighter tone to create the overall pattern. So a lot of foliage coming through here. Now, before I do anything else, I'm going to pick up my rigger and start putting in some of these branches. Just want to paint it through the wet paint, or at least up to the wet paint. So drag the brush out, pull it back a bit and change directions. It will create more realistic looking branches. You don't have to do it for every branch. Vary the colour. You're going to give that a light spray. So I suspect it's drying a bit too fast. Now we're going to go into this darker mixture. Don't press too hard. And I'm using this as an opportunity to also create a connection between some of the branches and some of the foliage. If I think a branch is looking too sharp-edged, then I can use this to modify that. I'm going to make this a bit stronger in tone still. Very light. If you press too hard, you lift all the paint from underneath and create more of a muddy look. You lose the cleanliness. And again, this is why I didn't spend any time adding shapes here. I knew this foliage was going to spread into it. Oops, don't lose the bright light. The main thing is to create an interesting pattern that's not too regular, but I don't mind this. This looks all right. Run a few more branches down here. This stage I don't paint through the foliage unless it's very wet, but I'll paint up to it. Now I'm going to pick up some of this darker colour, add a bit more French ultramarine and burnt sienna to it. And I'll use that to put in the shadow side to some of these branches on the trunk. I will paint through some of the foliage because that's where you get a branch in front of the foliage. So here I'm looking at the pattern of the darker branches, making sure it's not regular, it has some interesting spaces and is not overdone either. That'll do. Now I've lost a bit of light on this trunk and the branches. I'm going to just lift that, clean my brush. Just here and there. That'll do. And the cow, let's start with a light tone, just some raw sienna. That's good. Then I'll go in with some French ultramarine and burnt sienna and just the darker tones away from the light. I don't want a lot of light on this cow. Pick up some of this shadow colour and just drag that, maybe add a bit of green to it. That'll just help connect the cow to the ground. Pick up a similar mix, throw in a few more grasses. That's good. And then these grasses that I'm putting in now are just like a shorthand to say, yeah, there's grass here. You don't want to try and paint every blade of grass. Think in terms of describing something with as few words as possible. That's what we're trying to do with this brush. A few smaller marks further away. And I've got a couple of dots up here, so they'll become birds. Let's put another one over here. So these flat areas, I want to give them a bit more form. So I'm going to go and dry this and then go in with some more of the Jacaranda colour. That'll do two things. It'll break up some of these flatter shapes, and two, add another layer of tone. Okay, it didn't need a lot of drying. So I'm looking at my photo to see where the light areas and dark areas are. That's better. when you go in with paint like this, make sure you don't end up with just dabs of the same tone. You know, connect the shapes. Obviously not every piece, but what you don't want is a little dark dab there, dark dab there, dark dab, you know, then it looks more like a spotted leopard rather than a jacaranda. I hope you liked this video. If you have, please give it a like, and if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please do so. And if you're able, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I look forward to seeing you for the next one.